Carlos and the Skunk, written by Jan Romero Stevens, illustrated by Jean Arnola. Carlos could not remember how long he and Gloria had been best friends. When they were little, Gloria's mother would prop them up on old catalogs at the kitchen table, while she strung red chilies together, or rolled the dough for tortillas. If they were at Carlos's house, his mother would let them play in the garden while she sorted through the shiny green chilies, ripe red tomatoes, and sweet corn. It seemed as if Carlos and Gloria were always together. But as they grew older, Carlos's feelings toward his friend started to change. He began gazing at himself in the mirror, combing his hair this way and that to see which looked better. He started showing off for Gloria, wanting her to notice how brave and smart he was becoming. Carlos and Gloria lived in the fertile Espanola Valley, nestled in the mountains of northern New Mexico. Their thick-walled adobe homes, with high tin roofs and matching gardens, were within walking distance from one another. After school each day, Gloria and Carlos did their chores, weeding the garden, feeding their chickens, and doing their homework. After dinner, they were allowed to play. One fall evening, when they were running through the cornfield playing hide and seek, they caught a glimpse of a striped skunk slinking through the shadows of the garden. The children had seen the skunk many times before. It had only 2 toes on its right front paw, and they had nicknamed it Dos Dedos, 2 toes. Gloria feared the chance of arousing the skunk's anger and kept far away from it. But one afternoon, Carlos, wanting to impress Gloria, moved closer and closer until he could clearly see the narrow, single white stripe running from its head onto its tail. "Carlos, you'd better be careful," whispered Gloria, as Carlos inched along on his stomach toward the skunk. "Gloria, don't worry. I know just how to catch a skunk," Carlos boasted. "You know what I heard? If you pick a skunk up by its tail, it can't spray you." Gloria covered her mouth and giggled. "Oh, Carlos," she said, "no puedes creer todo lo que te dicen. You can't believe everything you hear." "But it's true," Carlos insisted to his doubting friend, and he became more determined than ever to prove himself right. He went to sleep that night still pondering over how to catch the skunk. The next day, Carlos had planned to take Gloria fishing, so he awoke early and got dressed. His mother prepared warm flour tortillas, fried eggs, and fresh salsa for breakfast. Salsa was a family tradition in Carlos's home. Made from tomatoes and green chilies, grown in the garden, the salsa was spicy and tasty. Carlos spooned it on just about everything, from breakfast to dinner. After breakfast, Carlos rushed outside to get his fishing pole and a can for worms. Rounding the corner of his house, he saw Gloria waiting for him by the gate. As they began walking down the road together, they saw Dos Dedos in the garden. "Que suerte! What luck!" thought Carlos. "I will catch Dos Dedos this time." Carlos gave no thought to what he might do with the skunk if he did catch it, but instead began creeping up behind it. He got closer and closer until he was inches away. For just a moment Carlos hesitated, then winked at Gloria before he reached out and grabbed the tail. In an instant the skunk's tail arched, and Carlos was sprayed from head to toe. With a gasp, Carlos fell backward onto the ground. He was so stunned he hardly realized what had happened. He had never smelled such a strong odor. His eyes itched, he coughed and snorted and blew his nose. He did his best not to cry in front of Gloria. Quite unconcerned, Dos Dedos disappeared down the side of an arroyo, and Carlos ran off to the river, leaving both Gloria and his fishing pole far behind. Carlos chose a secluded spot and pulled off all his clothes as fast as he could. The smell of them was unbearable. He jumped into the stream and washed out his clothing, laying it on a branch to dry in the sun. By afternoon his shirt and pants were dry, but the strong odor still lingered, especially on his shoes. He dressed and walked the long way home, climbing up and down the sides of the arroyos and stopping to gather piña nuts. When he finally reached his house, he carefully took off his shoes and left them by the back door. When his mother came in the kitchen, she noticed a strange smell. But before she could question Carlos, he slipped out the door and into the garden. Carlos had heard that tomato juice helped to get rid of the smell of skunk, so he picked every ripe tomato he could find and sneaked into the bathroom. He squeezed the tomatoes into the bathroom and all over his hair, scrubbing himself as hard as he could with the wash rag. Beginning to think he smelled better, he crawled into bed and fell asleep quickly after his unpleasant day. The next morning was Sunday, and Mamma was up early, patting and shaping the dough for tortillas. Dressed in his best shirt and pants, Carlos sat down at the table. "Carlos, you look very nice for church this morning," said Mamma as she untied her flowered apron. "Where are your shoes?" "They're outside, Mamma. I will get them when we leave," said Carlos, feeling uneasy. Carlos's family walked to the church near their home. When they arrived, they squeezed into a bench near the back. Carlos was pleased that he was able to sit next to Gloria. But a most peculiar thing happened in church that day. As the choir began a hymn, some of the singers began to make strange faces and cover their noses with handkerchiefs. The priest, as he walked to the altar, sneezed loudly and cleared his throat. The people in the first few rows of the congregation turned to each other with puzzled looks. The women began vigorously fanning their faces with their church programs. The children started squirming and pinched their noses. Little by little, the strange behavior began working its way toward the back of the church. Carlos couldn't figure out what was going on until he looked down at his feet. He was sitting next to an air vent for the church's heating system. The smell from his shoes, which he had forgotten to clean after being sprayed by Dos Dedos, was spreading through the heating ducts to the entire church. "Papa, I think we better go home," whispered Carlos, hoping no one would realize he was the source of the terrible smell. Several families began heading for the door. The priest dismissed the service early. Embarrassed, Carlos pushed his way out of the church. He heard Gloria calling to him, but he bolted through the door and ran all the way home. He untied his shoes, pulled them off, and left them on the back doorstep. Then he hurried to his room and shut the door. Troubled over how he might rid himself of the strong-smelling shoes, Carlos stayed in his bedroom until his mother called him for dinner. While they were eating, his parents noticed he was unusually quiet, but said nothing to him. Finally, when dinner was over, Papa turned to Carlos. "Carlos, I've noticed your shoes are looking a little small," said Papa, with a glance toward Mamma. "Isn't it time for a new pair?" Carlos nodded, breathing a sigh of relief. "Oh, si, Papa," he stammered. "My feet are getting too big for those shoes now." The next day, Carlos and Papa drove to town. After trying on several pairs of shoes, Carlos chose a pair of heeled cowboy boots that made him appear much taller. A few weeks passed and Carlos forgot about his encounter with the skunk. One evening, after a big dinner of pinto beans, rice, tortillas, and his favorite salsa, he decided to visit Gloria. He put on his new boots and took a good look at his hair in the mirror. As he was getting ready to leave, his father called him outside. "I need your help," said Papa, and he pointed beneath the bushes alongside the house. Carlos could just make out the shape of a small, black and white animal with three little ones that had made their home under the leaves. "Dios mío! Oh my goodness!" said Carlos. "What will we do?" "It's no problem, Carlos," said Papa. "You know what I hear? You can catch a skunk if you pick it up by its tail. You go first." Carlos's nose and eyes began to water just with the thought of it. "Oh, Papa, no puedes creer todo lo que te dicen. You know you can't believe everything you hear," Carlos said. And he drew himself up a little taller, smoothed back his hair, and headed for Gloria's house.